February 7th, 1951. The hills near Somni, Korea, are frozen into blades of ice and stone. The air is so cold it feels like swallowing glass with every breath, a bitter metallic cold that seeps through wool and canvas and settles deep in the bone. Here, on the slopes of a desolate rise designated Hill 180, you can hear the sharp crack of incoming rounds splitting the frigid air, followed by the angry buzz of their passage. You are crouched low, your cheek pressed against the frozen stock of an M1 Garand, as shards of granite and icy dirt spray into the air where a man stood only a moment before. This is the reality for the soldiers of Company E, 27th Infantry Regiment, the Wolfhounds, and their advance has ground to a bloody frozen halt. From a shallow depression in the snow-dusted earth, Captain Lewis Millett watches the unfolding disaster. His breath plumes in the thin air, each exhalation a fleeting white cloud against the grim gray sky. All around him, his men are pinned down, taking cover behind any rock or fold in the terrain that offers the slightest protection. The chatter of at least 2, maybe 3, heavy machine guns echoes from the fortified crest of the hill, their interlocking fields of fire creating a lethal web that no man can cross. Burp guns and rifles add to the cacophony, a relentless storm of steel that keeps every head down. 2 of his 3 platoons are caught in this open killing ground. The 3rd is struggling to provide covering fire, but the enemy holds every advantage. They have the high ground, they have fortified positions, and they have the Wolfhounds squarely in their sights. A medic, his Red Cross armband a stark target against the snow, low crawls past Millett's position, dragging a wounded soldier by the webbing of his field jacket. The wounded man leaves a dark trail on the frozen ground. The sounds are a symphony of desperation, the crack of rifles, the thud of bullets striking flesh and earth, the low moans of the injured, and the frantic shouts of platoon sergeants trying to maintain control. "Keep your heads down!" one screams, his voice nearly swallowed by the roar of a Browning automatic rifle opening up from the American line. It is a futile effort. They cannot advance, and they cannot stay where they are. The sun, a weak, hazy disk in the winter sky, offers no warmth, only the cold light by which to watch men die. Captain Millett feels a familiar cold anger building in his gut. This is not his first war. He fought his way through North Africa, Sicily, and Italy in the Second World War, earning a Silver Star after deserting his post in an Air Corps unit just to get to the front lines. He is a fighter, not a strategist who moves pins on a map. Some in the officer corps call him reckless, a man whose audacity sometimes borders on the insubordinate. But his men know him as Louis, a leader who would never ask them to go where he would not lead. He watches as a machine gun nest on the ridge spits another stream of tracers, forcing an entire squad to burrow deeper into the frozen earth. He can see the fear and the futility in their posture. He knows that in another 10 minutes, another 15, his company will cease to be an effective fighting force. It will be a collection of casualties and survivors, broken and scattered on this forsaken hill. The very air crackles with the kind of tension that precedes a breaking point. Every soldier here understands the brutal arithmetic of their situation. To remain is to be whittled down, man by man. To retreat would be to run a gauntlet of fire across the open ground they just crossed. The strategic objective, this barren and insignificant piece of high ground, has become a meat grinder. The stories of heroes are forged in moments just like this one, when the path forward is blocked by insurmountable odds. If you believe these accounts of courage deserve to be remembered, subscribing to the channel ensures that the legacies of men like Captain Millett are never lost to time. He shifts his weight, the frozen ground crunching beneath him. He knows a decision must be made now, not in 5 minutes. It will not be a decision born of careful planning in a rear echelon tent. It will be born here, in the freezing dirt, under the threat of total annihilation. The decision crystallizes in Captain Millett's mind not as a complex tactical calculation, but as a primal, irrefutable truth. Firepower has failed them. Maneuver is impossible. All that is left is shock, violence, and the raw, terrifying power of the cold steel in a man's hands. He looks up at the crest of Hill 180, at the winking muzzle flashes of the enemy machine guns. They are confident up there, comfortable in their fortifications, bleeding his company dry from a distance. They do not expect what is about to happen. No sane modern army would do what he is about to order. That is precisely why it will work. He pushes himself up, ignoring the angry zip of a round passing close enough to stir the air by his helmet. He scrambles in a low crouch toward the position of his first platoon leader, a young lieutenant whose face is a pale mask of concentration and strain. The ground is treacherous, a mix of frozen mud and loose scree. Dirt kicks up around his boots as enemy riflemen track his movement. "Get the word out!" Millet yells over the din, his voice a raw command that cuts through the noise of battle. "Tell them to fix bayonets. We are going up that hill." The lieutenant stares at him for a heartbeat, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and awe. There is no time to question. He nods sharply, the understanding dawning on his face, and immediately begins shouting the order to his non-commissioned officers. The command ripples through the pinned-down platoons like an electric current. At first it is met with confusion. Fix bayonets? Here? In 1951? It is a command that belongs to another century, to a different kind of war. But the order comes from Captain Millet, from Louis, and that is enough. A new sound begins to cut through the gunfire, a series of sharp metallic clicks. Shh, clink, shh, clink. It is the sound of M1 bayonets, 16 inches of Parkerized steel being drawn from their scabbards and locked onto the gas cylinders of M1 Garand rifles. It is a purposeful, mechanical sound, a sound of grim resolve that spreads from man to man. Soldiers who were just moments ago hugging the frozen earth for dear life begin to stir, their movements no longer those of fear, but of preparation. They check their ammunition, they tighten the grip on their rifles, and they lock their eyes on the captain. Millet moves along the line, a man possessed by a singular violent purpose. He is not behind his men, he is among them, his presence a force of nature. "Get ready," he shouts, his voice carrying an intensity that leaves no room for doubt. "We are going to take them. We are going to run right through them." He reaches his own rifle, an M1 Garand he had set down, and with a swift, practiced motion, he draws his own bayonet and snaps it into place. The weapon feels different now, heavier, more primal. It is no longer just a firearm, it is a spear. History often turns on the seemingly mad decisions of a single individual, moments when convention is shattered by sheer will. To witness more of these pivotal events that define courage, consider subscribing and joining this chronicle of valor. The men of Easy Company watch their commander. They see the fire in his eyes, the absolute certainty in his posture. The fear that had paralyzed them moments before begins to transform into something else, a cold, focused rage. They are the Wolfhounds, a regiment with a storied history stretching back to Siberia, and they are being led by a man who fears nothing. The enemy on the hill continues to pour down fire, oblivious to the momentous shift in morale happening below them. They believe they have the Americans trapped, bleeding out, ready to break. They have no idea they are about to face a force from a bygone era, a wave of cold steel and raw fury. Captain Millet takes his position at the very front of the center platoon, a position of maximum exposure. He looks left, then right, meeting the eyes of his soldiers. They are ready. The clicking has stopped. An eerie, momentary silence seems to fall over the American line, a held breath before the plunge. There is no bugle, no drum, only the raw, powerful voice of a single man. Captain Lewis Millet rises from the frozen earth as if pulled by an unseen force, his rifle held at the ready, the long, wicked blade of his bayonet pointed directly at the enemy crest. For one eternal second, he is a lone silhouette against the bleak Korean landscape, a perfect target. Then, he bellows a single word, a command that seems to tear from the very depths of his soul. "Charge!" It is not a request. It is an unleashing. And as if his voice has broken a spell, the entire line of the 1st and 3rd platoons rises with him. Nearly 100 men who moments before were inching their faces into the dirt are now on their feet, a wave of olive drab and glinting steel surging up the deadly slope. A collective, guttural roar erupts from the throats of the wolfhounds, an animalistic sound of fury and desperation that momentarily stuns the enemy gunners on the ridge. For a fraction of a second, the torrent of fire from above seems to falter. The sheer, suicidal audacity of the attack causing a flicker of disbelief. Then, that disbelief turns to panicked fury. The machine guns, which had been firing in controlled bursts, now open up with a frantic, unbroken roar, their barrels glowing cherry red in the frigid air. The entire hillside becomes a hellish garden of spitting dirt and ricocheting steel as the gunners traverse their weapons back and forth, trying to mow down the impossible wave of men running directly into their muzzles. You are in that wave. You scramble to your feet, your M1 feeling like a clumsy extension of your own arms. The ground trembles beneath the pounding of 200 boots on frozen soil. The air is a solid wall of noise, the deafening crackle of 1,000 hornets flying past your ears. To your left, a man from your squad pitches forward without a sound, his helmet skittering across the icy ground. To your right, another cries out and collapses, clutching a shattered leg. There's no time to stop, no time to help. To hesitate is to die. Your lungs burn with the sub-zero air. Your legs scream in protest as you churn up the steep, unforgiving incline. Your entire world narrows to the space in front of you and the bobbing helmet of the man ahead. At the very tip of this human spear is Captain Millet. He runs not with the crouch of a man trying to avoid fire, but with an upright, almost contemptuous fearlessness. He is firing his Garand from the hip, the rifle bucking in his hands, ejecting empty clips with a signature ping that is lost in the chaos. He pulls a grenade from his webbing, yanks the pin with his teeth, and hurls it in a high arc toward a machine gun nest that is savaging his left flank. The explosion, a muffled crump and a puff of black smoke, momentarily silences the weapon. He does not break stride. He is the engine of the charge, the focal point of all the violence, drawing the enemy's fire and his men's courage in equal measure. Acts of valor this raw are what legends are built on. To ensure these stories of ultimate sacrifice and courage are preserved, subscribing is the best way to support the mission. The distance is closing. 50 yards. 40. The faces of the enemy soldiers are now visible, pale circles of shock and terror peering over the rims of their foxholes. They had been hunters. Now they are the hunted. The charge is no longer just a desperate rush. It has become an unstoppable force, a wave of vengeful steel that cannot be turned back. The first of Millet's men reach the lower lip of the enemy defenses. There is no pause, no hesitation. They leap into the trenches and foxholes, and the distant, impersonal crack of rifle fire is replaced by the brutal, intimate sounds of close-quarters combat. The world dissolves into a chaotic, claustrophobic nightmare of grunts, screams, and the sickening thud of steel on bone. You are over the parapet, landing in a crouch in the narrow confines of a trench slick with ice and something warm and dark. An enemy soldier, his face a mask of terror and surprise, rises up to meet you, his rifle coming up too slowly. There is no thought, only instinct. You lunge forward, the entire weight of your body behind the 16 inches of steel at the end of your M1 Garand. The impact is jarring, a brutal shock that travels up your arms. The fight is over in less than a second, but there is another enemy soldier right behind him, and another beyond that. This is not a battle of tactics anymore. It is a series of 100 individual duels to the death. The tight quarters negate the enemy's numerical advantage. Rifles are too long to swing effectively, so they become short spears and heavy clubs. Men grapple hand to hand, slipping in the blood-stained snow, fighting with knives, entrenching tools, and bare fists. The air is thick with the smell of cordite, sweat, and spilled blood. The disciplined lines of the charge have disintegrated into a frantic, swirling melee inside the enemy's own fortifications. The wolfhounds are a savage, unstoppable force, their initial fear burned away by the white-hot adrenaline of kill or be killed. And at the heart of this storm is Captain Lewis Millet. He is a figure of pure, kinetic violence. He lands in a trench directly between two enemy soldiers. He pivots, bayoneting the man on his left, then immediately uses the butt of his rifle in a brutal, crushing arc to fell the man on his right. He does not pause. He sees a machine gun crew farther down the trench line, recovering from the initial shock and attempting to swing their heavy weapon around to bear on the Americans now inside their perimeter. Millet bellows a wordless roar and charges them alone, running straight down the trench. They see him coming. A soldier with a burp gun tries to fire, but Millet is too close, too fast. He impales the man with his bayonet, lifting him off his feet before moving on to the next. This is combat reduced to its most primal elements, a brutal intimacy that modern warfare was supposed to have rendered obsolete. It is the kind of fighting that demands a courage that is almost impossible to comprehend from the safe distance of history. The stories of men who faced this kind of horror deserve to be honored, and subscribing is a powerful way to ensure their legacy of valor endures. Within the trench, Millet is a whirlwind of destruction. He discards his now empty rifle, pulls his .45 caliber M1911 pistol, and continues to fight his way toward the stubbornly resistant machine gun. He shoots one gunner, then pistol whips another, his movements economical and deadly. Inspired by his impossible example, his men surge forward with renewed ferocity. They fight with the conviction of men who know their leader is sharing the greatest risk. They swarm over the remaining enemy positions in the forward trench, overwhelming the defenders with sheer, concentrated aggression. Within a few brutal minutes, what had been a fortified line of defense is now a charnel house, littered with the bodies of its former occupants. The Americans have secured a foothold, but as Captain Millet stands for a moment, chest heaving, reloading his pistol with a fresh magazine, he looks up. The fight is not over. Higher up the slope, on the true crest of Hill 180, the main enemy force is entrenched preparing a counterattack. He knows they have only won the first round. There is no time for rest, no time to tend to the wounded or count the dead. To pause now in the captured but exposed forward trench would be suicide. The main enemy force on the higher second crest of Hill 180 is already reacting. Shouted commands in a foreign tongue drift down the slope, and the distinct, heavy sound of a Maxim-style machine gun being repositioned grinds through the air. They are preparing to rain death upon the ground. Easy company has just paid for in blood. Captain Millet understands the brutal calculus of momentum. To stop is to cede the initiative, to become a static target, and to die. They have to keep going. He looks at the faces of the men around him. They are smeared with grime and blood, their eyes wide with the aftershock of the savage fighting. Their chests heave, sucking in the painfully cold air. They have just survived hell, and he is about to ask them to go back in. He does not waste time with a speech. Words are useless here. Only action matters. He turns, climbs out of the relative safety of the captured trench, and once again stands exposed on the open hillside. He points his bayonet, still dark with the evidence of its recent work, toward the final enemy position some 75 yards up the slope. "Come on," he roars, his voice raw and cracking with strain. "We are not done. Follow me." For a moment it seems an impossible request. The men are exhausted, their adrenaline beginning to fade, the cold and the pain beginning to set in. Then, one by one, they begin to follow. A platoon sergeant is the first to his feet, then a corporal, then a private who cannot be more than 18 years old. They climb out of the trench, their movements stiff and weary, and form a ragged line on either side of their captain. They are no longer a full company, but a bloodied, determined remnant. The sight of their leader, already moving forward, already drawing fire, is a command more powerful than any spoken order. They lean into the slope and begin to run again. The enemy on the summit is ready this time. There is no shock, only a prepared and furious fusillade of fire. Machine guns, rifles, and grenade launchers open up, churning the ground in front of the advancing Americans. The slope is steeper here, the footing more treacherous. Men slip on patches of ice and fall, some getting back up, others lying still. The charge is slower now, more ragged, a product of sheer willpower rather than explosive energy. Millet is again at the front, a magnet for enemy fire, yet he remains untouched. He continues to fire his pistol, the sharp cracks of the .45 a counterpoint to the enemy's automatic weapons. This brand of leadership, where a commander leads from the absolute front, is a hallmark of the greatest battlefield legends. Following this channel by subscribing allows you to witness more of these extraordinary accounts of command and courage. 40 yards, 30. A grenade explodes just ahead of Millet, a deafening blast that sends a shower of frozen dirt and hot shrapnel into the air. He stumbles, hit in the legs and back by fragments, but he does not go down. He lets out a cry of pain and rage and pushes forward, his pace barely slowing. Seeing their captain hit and yet still advancing has an electrifying effect on his men. Any remaining hesitation is vaporized, replaced by a protective fury. They surge past him, their roars of anger and defiance now aimed at avenging their leader. The ragged line of wolfhounds, now less than 50 strong, transforms once more into an avenging spearhead, aimed directly at the heart of the final enemy position. The final collision is a maelstrom of desperation. The Americans, fueled by a mixture of rage, exhaustion, and the primal need to finish the fight, crash into the main enemy line. This is not the panicked defense of the lower trench. These are the core defenders, well entrenched and determined to hold their ground. But the wolfhounds are a force beyond reason. They leap into the final set of foxholes and bunkers with a ferocity that borders on the superhuman. The fighting is immediate, personal, and utterly without quarter. Bayonets, rifle butts, and bare hands are once again the primary weapons. The summit of Hill 180 becomes a churning vortex of close-quarters combat. Captain Millet, despite his wounds, is in the thick of it. The shrapnel in his legs sends searing jolts of pain up his body with every movement, but he fights on as if possessed. He has discarded his empty pistol and is now wielding a discarded enemy rifle like a club, its bayonet having been broken off in an earlier encounter. He moves from one pocket of resistance to another, his presence a terrifying omen for the defenders and a galvanizing symbol for his men. He personally silences a machine gun post that is holding up his right flank, clubbing the crew into submission before they can bring their weapon to bear on his soldiers inside the perimeter. He is no longer just a captain. He is the living embodiment of the wolfhound spirit, a relentless, unstoppable attacker. Slowly, agonizingly, the tide turns. The sheer, sustained violence of the American assault begins to break the enemy's will. Defenders who stand and fight are cut down. Those who try to flee are shot in the back. A small group attempts to surrender, raising their hands, but in the chaotic frenzy of the melee, they are overwhelmed before any order can be given to take prisoners. The momentum is absolute. The remaining enemy soldiers, seeing their comrades fall and their positions overrun, finally break. They abandon their heavy weapons, scramble out of their fortifications, and begin a desperate, panicked flight down the reverse slope of the hill. The surviving men of Easy Company rise from the captured positions, their bodies battered and bleeding, and pour disciplined rifle fire into the retreating enemy, ensuring they cannot regroup for a counterattack. And then, as quickly as it began, the fighting is over. An almost unnatural silence descends upon the hilltop, broken only by the ragged gasps of the exhausted survivors, the low moans of the wounded from both sides, and the whistling of the wind over the frozen crest. The battle for Hill 180 has been won. Captain Millet stands unsteadily, leaning on the enemy rifle, surveying the scene. The slopes are littered with the cost of his audacious decision. But his company, which had been on the verge of annihilation, is now in command of the high ground. He has not just saved them from encirclement, he has achieved his objective against impossible odds. The full impact of their accomplishment begins to sink in. They have routed a force estimated to be at least twice their size, seizing a heavily fortified position through the sheer shock of a bayonet charge. Such an event is a testament to the fact that sometimes the oldest, most brutal forms of warfare are the most effective. The preservation of these incredible moments in military history is our core mission, and by subscribing, you ensure these chronicles of heroism continue to be told. Millet finally allows himself to sit, the fire of combat fading to reveal the deep, throbbing pain of his wounds. Medics begin to move among the men, their work just beginning. Looking back down the slope, at the path they had taken, it seems impossible that any of them had made it to the top alive. The aftermath is a landscape of stark, brutal accounting. On the blood-soaked snow and frozen earth of Hill 180, the cost of victory is laid bare. Medics from Easy Company move methodically through the captured trenches, their movements urgent but weary. They place tags on the American fallen and work desperately to stabilize the wounded, Captain Millet among them. The shrapnel wounds in his back and legs are significant, bleeding sluggishly in the frigid air. But he refuses priority evacuation, insisting that his more grievously injured men be taken down the hill first. His leadership, so ferocious in the attack, is now one of quiet, steadfast command in its wake. He watches as his sergeants conduct a quick head count. The numbers are grim. Easy Company has suffered heavy casualties. Nearly every man who made the charge has been wounded in some way. But they are alive. They hold the hill. Below them, the rest of the battalion, which had been pinned down by the same interlocking fire, can now advance. The key strategic position that had locked down the entire front has been broken open by the sheer, anachronistic audacity of a single company of men led by a captain deemed reckless by his superiors. As the sun begins its descent, casting long, cold shadows across the battlefield, the scale of what they accomplished becomes clear. A count of the enemy dead reveals the terrible effectiveness of the charge. Over 40 enemy soldiers lie within the trenches and bunkers, most killed by bayonet or at extremely close range. Dozens more are scattered down the reverse slope, cut down as they fled. They had captured weapons, intelligence, and more importantly, they had shattered the enemy's morale in this sector. The news of the Bayonet Hill charge spreads like wildfire up and down the American lines, a jolt of inspiration in a war often characterized by grueling, static, attritional fighting. The man once criticized for recklessness is now hailed as a hero. His singular decisive action, born not of a staff meeting, but of the desperate reality of the front line, had saved the lives of his men by risking them completely. It was a paradox of combat that only those who have been there can truly understand. Captain Lewis Millett would be evacuated against his will, his wounds finally forcing him from the field. His actions on that frozen 7th of February, 1951, would earn him the nation's highest award for valor, the Medal of Honor. His citation would speak of his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty. But for the men of Easy Company, the Wolfhounds, he was simply Louis, the captain who led from the front, the man who ran toward the guns so they would have the courage to follow. The story of Captain Millett is a stark reminder that in the face of certain destruction, sometimes the boldest path is the only one to survival. His legacy, and those of heroes like him, are the reason this channel exists. We are deeply grateful to viewers who subscribe, ensuring that these timeless chronicles of courage will never be forgotten. His bayonet charge on Hill 180 would pass into the permanent lore of the United States Army, a legendary act of valor from a forgotten war, proving that sometimes history is written not with a pen, but with cold, hard steel.